Hey, me, Makari. You join Discord and Twitch. Hey, thanks, bye. Okay, so I think the next video I wanted to watch was this one. This probably isn't a very hee-hoo funny game, but it's probably a very relevant one to the world we live in currently. So as always, guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, please go and like and subscribe to the original, and let's see what this is all about.
Crash. Right,
a gaming crash.
Let's be honest. The majority of news coming out about gaming at the moment has been like a constant spiral of doom and gloom and misery.
Oh, dude, absolutely not. If you ever want a prime example of doomerism, you don't need to look at like flat earthers. You don't need to look at like religion. Look at the gaming community. If you want the best example about people who are the most self-deprecant and self-loathing of any community, gamers are some of the most privileged and doomerist kinds of people you'll ever meet.
And it's just constant. And at present, gaming history is literally
no one wants to look at the good stuff.
Before our very
people
eyes.
Only hyperfix on the bad stuff because they feel entitled to the good stuff.
In 10, 20, 30 years going to talk about. Very much like we'll talk about the video crash of 1983. And it's a very negative portion of history at the moment. So I wanted to discuss.
She says like the video game crash of 1983. Dude, most of the people watching YouTube aren't even older than 13. You honestly think any of these people are going to care about this kind of stuff?
Discuss with you basically how the gaming industry.
And really, that's kind of like the hyperbolicness of it.
In such a mess this
the reason why it
around.
never gets any more attention is because the only people who care about this are a very few small demographic of people.
Towards one. And I feel like the obvious place to start with this is back in 2020 in the pandemic. During the pandemic, gaming was literally the savior of people in lockdown.
Not even a lie. I had some friends who who were from high school. I hadn't spoken to them in ages. And when 2020 hit and the pandemic hit, all of a sudden these people I hadn't spoke to in probably about 10 years suddenly resurfaced into my Steam list and started asking me about games that I'd been playing. Like, to say that video games have its problems would be an understatement. But gaming during the pandemic had its biggest boom in probably about 50 years. Because it was the first time in God knows how long that people were forced to stay home and weren't being rushed off their asses. People finally had time to play games.
Lockdown, everyone's stuck in their homes, they're furloughed from work, they've got nothing to do, and gaming was just doing really, really well. A lot of people needed it to escape the drudgery of being
It was doing well, but it also introduced an entirely new generation of degenerates into our community.
Or TV. Well, you couldn't watch sports
for Twitch, really,
because no one was allowed to even play sports in the first place, let alone get to watch it on TV. Therefore, gaming was pretty much...
Isn't it so funny how people are all happy to jump on the gaming bandwagon when it's relevant and trendy, but the second it's no longer the only viable source of entertainment and coping for some people, those same people then jump back to it, chastising and demonizing it, like, oh, gaming is so terrible and it encourages violence. Oh, what's that? I'm furloughed and have nothing better to do? Well, time to play those games that I've been so chastising for the last decade. Oh, I'm not a hypocrite, shut up.
One of the only options for many people. And the gaming industry, as a result of that, was absolutely booming, and to an extent they saw themselves as pandemic proof. As in, like, the whole world was burning down around them, yet they were growing and growing. It was like nothing could stop them. Through this period, did the gaming industry gain a false sense of security? Well,
I mean, duh. Because most of those people who were being forced to play games during the pandemic were only there because of the situational necessity of the pandemic. So, although yes, you would have some flow over of people who would have only discovered gaming properly because of the pandemic, most of the people who would have jumped onto gaming because of the pandemic would have left once the pandemic was over. So yes, there was a mild boost in general, but most of those people went back to their normal lives, being boring people, working their boring 9-to-5 jobs, having 2.5 kids, getting pegged by their wife on the weekend, and only would have 1 hour to play their video games otherwise.
One thing is for sure, according to the news, the gaming industry is constantly complaining about not making.
Because here's the thing, to sort of supersede that slightly, there are two demographics of gamers. There's the aged gamer who grew up with gaming in the previous generation. You know, the millennials, the people who were brought up in the 90s, who were there during the Renaissance, in the explosion of gaming in general. Those people have grown up. They're older. They are now adults with 2.5 kids. They don't have time for gaming in general. These are the people who get maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours on the weekend after work before their wife has to peg them. And that's the only experience of gaming they get. So when they start seeing games online, they feel entitled to complain about it or talk about it because they want to be part of it, but they don't have the time to. Then there's the other demographic of gamers, which is the new generation of ADHD-ridden attention span adult children who have been brought up on TikTok, who only have the attention span to be able to play a game that's instantly overstimulating them with dopamine and serotonin. And there's such a disparity between those two generations, between those two demographics, that it creates nothing but austerity and disparity for gaming in general.
Enough money, considering the vast amount of cost that they're putting into everything, with how many hundreds of millions this cost and how many hundreds of millions that cost. Well, of course, they're probably not going to be making the money back on it. But
you notice then this is kind of exemplifies my point. The fact that the main games that get made these days are the ones that either invoke nostalgia to bait that older demographic, or are ADHD-ridden stimulation overload fests to pander to the modern generation. There's very rarely an in-between.
This has seen various companies, as a result of that, laying off thousands and thousands of members of staff to basically try to meet shareholder promises. Multiple expensive AAA games.
I would say that's the only reason, because what she just said is very true. There's a much bigger weight these days on financial gain and making money, because whereas in the past, the gaming industry was seen as like a bit of a novelty. Nowadays, stockholders and shareholders have seen the gaming industry, and what do shareholders and stockholders want? Money. They see money. So there's much more precedent on making money in games these days, but not willingness to invest in it.
Expected.
So when you have an apathy for investment, but you have high expectations for what you get out of gaming, the margin for failure becomes infinitely smaller because of that. You're not allowed to make as much of a mistake. You're not allowed to, like, the margin for failure and for not succeeding becomes a lot tighter, and that is what encourages games to flop. You have many more failures than this day and age, because rather than games being made for the sake of gaming and creativity, they're made for the sake of making money. And when they're made with the sake of making money, if they don't make money, they fail. So there's more opportunities to fail now because of that.
Actually, and games like Suicide Squad and Final Fantasy
Suicide Squad
Rebirth are like prime examples of this. I'm not even going
you
into
mean crime?
details about each of those. I've made a video about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Square Enix only last week. So if you want,
God, she's so British.
to know a bit more depthy information on that, go find that now, or at the end of this
That's
video.
my baby.
Others are using the excuse that basically the rising cost of game development is making predatory microtransactions.
But that rise in gaming development is entirely indicative of what I said a second ago. There's much more weight on making money in games now. Because the precedent on making money is there, they're trying to put much more effort into making them, which requires them to have more staff members, have much more of a investment into making games. But the more investment there is, the more expectation there is to utilize the assets you have, which makes things more costly. But the cost of a game is not always indicative of the success of the game. Again, Suicide Squad, prime example.
An essential part of gaming's future for it to be sustainable. An example of this would be Tekken 8 stealth dropping paywalled features only after receiving glittering, sparkling reviews,
I hate it when games do that.
A huge amount of distrust in their player
base. That is the quickest way you lose respect from your audience. Like, Blizzard does that, Activision does it. Isn't it funny how, like, most of the time this happens, it's usually a AAA studio? Like, your Activisions, your Blizzards. They're not saying it's only AAA studios, but you rarely see that kind of mentality from AA. Because again, there's not as much of a cost of failure. They've made that investment and they've put all that money into the producing a game more so than any double studio will. So these AAA studios are more likely to do that kind of predatory bullshit because they have to try and make as much money as possible, no matter the cost or ethical cost of everything.
Square Enix released their notification of extraordinary losses, which is absolutely mental. Again, as I said, I've done a video on it. Xbox has just the other day basically closed a load of subsidiaries for Bethesda, which was horrendous considering some of those have released games which are absolute bangers. And then Warner Brothers have announced that they're going to only focus on key franchises such as Mortal Kombat and Harry Potter going forward, and even those are going to an extent get bastardized into service games apparently. The general call to action,
that's exactly what I was talking about. They're not willing to make I've spoken about this in the past. Like, a lot of these studios aren't willing to take a risk on something that might make money because their stockholders aren't going to give them that risk of failure. They're not going to give them the chance failure. If they fail, they get shut down. So these guys have to only work on projects that they know will make money. Things that they know are established titles that will be guaranteed to make them money and get some kind of response, rather than risking on a new IP, a new brand that might not hit it off.
Seems from the execs is that they want to make more mobile games. They want to make a whole load of...
Dude, think about it this way. The AAA studios, also beautiful stop frame. The mentality of the people in charge of AAA studios is, hey, make money. And the studio's like, how do we do that? I don't know. Make money. Well, okay, we'll try. If you don't make money, we'll fire you. Well, shit. Like, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation.
Service games with
the stockholders, the people with the money, they only care about the fact they make money. They don't care about how and how to nurture that.
And they essentially want to put less and less emphasis on traditional one-player games, which you basically pay for once. They want you to buy their games and then own nothing and then continue to feed...
Oh, nothing. Sorry, I'm pointing out how British is. Nothing. You want nothing. Darling, there's a T and a H in there somewhere. Nothing. Nothing. Not nothing. Nothing.
Them and then be happy with that. So let me ask you, bearing in mind that most of these decisions that are being made are not actually in the interest of the gamers who are going to be buying and playing these games, but rather only in the short-term interest of shareholders, how is making products that we don't want and gamers don't want going to fix anything? I've come up with two different perspectives.
Because people are sheep. Like, 90% of gamers are not interested in the economics or ethical side of gaming. 90% of gamers only care about playing a game that they can play for those 2 hours on the weekend before their wife pegs them and they have to go and look after their 3 children from a different marriage. They don't have the time outside of work to care about the ethics and the financial side of gaming. They only care about the fact they have 2 hours to play a game and that they want to play that game. That is why.
As to how this can both have a positive effect and a negative effect, but will ultimately end up sending gaming into a doom spiral. Okay, so the positive consequence. Short-term financial stability. Prioritizing shareholder interests through...
TLDR, what she's about to say is that most AAA studios only care about short-term gains rather than long-term investments. Everything she's about to say. I know this because this is exactly what I looked into. And the problem is the only way you make change for this is by having a universal, like, upheaval where everybody jumps on board to make change. But again, because most people work a 9-to-5 job, only have 2 hours to play games on the weekend, they don't have the mental capacity to actually worry about the ethical side of things. So this is never going to change because not enough people are willing to make change. So long as they get to play video games, they will always go for the game over the ethical side of it, which inevitably, much later down the line, will eventually end up with the crash that's being talked about. But we're currently on that, like, right now, in this, like, spiral that's being talked about. So look at it this way, right? So if this line is time, and this line is the amount people care, as the line represents the stability of gaming, right? So as time is going by, games have had a peak, and now all of a sudden we're in this clash. The red line is where people will care about change and wanting to do something about it, because it's going to have, like, when it gets to this red line, that's when it's no longer stable. It's when your games will be affected, when your studios get shut down. When it reaches here, people will start doing something about it, because all of a sudden all your studios shut down, the games will be much worse, there won't be as many of them, your games that are made will be much more expensive because there's so much more demand for them. But by that point, you've already had your chance to try and make, like, the things to be made better, that kind of change need to be done here. But the problem is the point of interest for people to actually make a difference about things, to actually enact change, is much lower than the threshold that would need to be met for something to actually be done about it.
Strategies such as implementing microtransactions and developing mobile and service-based games can provide a short-term financial boost. This approach may help stabilize companies financially by tapping into consistent revenue streams, thus allowing them to survive market fluctuations and maintain operational capabilities. This financial stability could potentially enable companies to invest in new technologies and innovative projects in the future. This is what they want, but it doesn't mean that this is what they're going to get.
It is a ever more exacerbating spiral. Things become more and more turbulent and tumultuous the further down this spiral you go. And it'll become more and more explosive until a critical point has been hit. At which point, that's when people will notice the fact that things have gone wrong. At that point, it'll be far too late.
And then the negative consequences.
At that point,
long-term,
you know what the thing is there? You know what will happen there? It'll be the AA and the indie studios that bring things back. Those that weren't so prevalent towards the cost of failure. Those that were not so invested and so chained to the financial repercussions of things. When inevitably that crash hits its zenith, the AA and the indie studios will be what helps rise it back up again.
Consumer distrust. Making products that prioritize profit over player satisfaction can lead to consumer distrust and resentment.
Yes, Blizzard.
Players might feel their loyalty and investments are undervalued if they perceive that their interests are consistently secondary.
Look, they've got a pink controller to show that she is girl, and blue controller to show that he is boy. Isn't that so hip and trendy, my dudes, my fellow gamers?
Corporate profits. This growing dissatisfaction could lead to a decline in brand loyalty, reduced engagement, and
dude, this is the most stock footage ever. No gamer's desk is that clean. I'm sorry. I'm gonna like flashbang you with real world right now, but yeah, I'm sorry. No self-respecting gamer's desk is that clean. You look at your desk right now. You tell me your desk doesn't have some kind of crap on it. Look at my desk. Yeah, it's a little bit cluttered. But this is a very appropriate reflection of some gamer's desk. You know, there's a little bit of mess, a little bit of clutter. No desk is ever that tidy. I'm sorry. Stock footage.
In the customer base. Over time, this might erode the company's reputation and financial performance, leading to a negative spiral affecting future profitability and
if your desk is that clean, how does it feel to be a sociopath?
I think we're already at this stage. So what can we learn from all of this? Basically, the overconfidence generated in the game industry from the record pandemic profits is completely unfounded and ridiculous. Because of course people weren't...
I'm starting to get a slight suspicion this person has a bias towards Final Fantasy, judging by how much stock footage she uses from it.
going to continue gaming to the very same level as soon as they were allowed back outside again, because people were allowed to go out and watch or play sports. They could visit family and friends. They were finally allowed to you know, go on holiday abroad. They were able to even go to restaurants.
Oh, she said flipping! British moment! British moment! She's British!
After a year of not being allowed to. And
Yes,
then, also
water.
something else to consider is that people in America, their stimulus checks won't have lasted all that long. So
I really feel as though this entire video could have been summarized into a 5-minute point presentation of saying, gaming's fucked. And it's going to be fucked for a long time. But it might not be fucked all the time, but things are gonna be fucked. Who doesn't like getting fucked? Wait, sorry, tangent.
they wouldn't have been able to sit there and pay for more games. They would have probably wanted to go out and actually spend their money on something a bit more meaningful than being stuck indoors. So gaming, once again, at that point, would have ended up as a smaller part of life again, like it was prior to the pandemic. But
wait, is that my music?
Even
oh, I thought that was my music playing for a second.
Essentially, the new normal is not normal. I don't really know how else to explain it, but life is different now than it ever was before the pandemic.
Whoa, dude, like, life is different than it was before, but if it was different before, what does it mean if it's different now? And if it was different before, does that mean that things were the same that they are in the future that they could be now? So if things are what they are now, does that mean the future is going to be way more established and deferential than what the normal is now? Bro.
I mean, for one thing, away from gaming, the greater world is struggling to bounce back after all of these lockdowns. A massive, really obvious example of this is Putin. He exploited the world.
Politics.
whilst it was weak,
Guys, look away, politics.
Almost like a perfect opportunity to invade the Ukraine. This has
politics in my video games? Disgusting.
All over the world, regardless of which countries have their own reserves or not. And the general consumer is
I didn't tune into this to get involved in politics.
Than they were prior to the pandemic.
And that's how they get you. Gaming is as involved with politics as the rest of the world. And anyone who tries to deny otherwise is going through their life with blinkers on. The thing with gaming, though, is it's designed for escapism. You don't want to be part of politics. But when people start actually looking at politics with gaming, it's a very, like, there's a very big grey area between playing games for the sake of gaming and then getting immersed in the politics. Generally speaking, you're not going to do that because you play games to get away from politics. But it doesn't deny the fact that gaming does have its place in politics.
They've got other priorities to spend their money on rather than just trivial stuff like games. So maybe
it's the same mentality. Like, to that extent, it's the same mentality of you can enjoy something without being a advocate for it. Like me, I'm part of the LGBTQ community. That doesn't mean I have to advocate for them, but I still enjoy the LGBTQ stuff. I still enjoy gaming. That doesn't mean I stand up for politics.
Just maybe.
I just want to have goopy dopamine in my brain.
The gaming industry for their short-sightedness in these unprecedented
Yeah, it's impossible to avoid every level, but
we absolutely
you choose that level.
I think that the gaming industry did know that this would happen, but they needed investor confidence. That's it. They needed money to be able to continue doing what they were doing. But history shows.
You know, I just realized you saying James Stephanie Sterling even. She talks like her. She talks like Sterling, and it's been bugging me this entire time why she sounds familiar. She sounds like Sterling.
That pandemics are usually 1/3 of a dark triad, with the other parts of the triad being economic downturns and wars. So when you take into consideration that this is actually the 4th time...
Bruh. I went into this video thinking, I mean, we're having a very constructive conversation here, but the fact that we've managed to, like, deep fry ourselves into getting into a conversation about war correlating to video games, I think there's some very poignant conversation to be had here. But I think getting fixated on the element of the war kind of thing kind of pulls away from the entire reason we're having this conversation.
In recorded history, that this is very prominently happened. Before the video game industry was falling, the Roman Empire fell. The Roman Empire. And
yes, the Roman Empire. I remember it like it was only yesterday, back when Carthus was playing on their N25, playing Zelda, the Trojan Mask, and they too had their gaming recession, and all the AAA industries of the Roman Empire went into recession and could no longer play video games anymore. So they enacted the Battle of Troy to try and fight for the equality of video games. Am I right, my fellow gamers?
Bear with me, stick with me on this. This isn't a reach. I've got facts to
Prove
back
it.
this up. Number 1, the Antonine Plague and the Marco-Manic Wars, 165 to 180 AD. The pandemic was the Antonine Plague, which was possibly smallpox or measles. It's
all right. I'm sorry, lady. This is like, there would have been a much more eloquent and like relevant way of talking about this. But people don't, like, most people who are gonna watch this aren't gonna have a care about history. They want to know why video gaming is gonna crash. The second you change the subject to history, most people are gonna tune out. I mean, I get it. I, an intellectual, understand this, but I'd say about 90% of the people watching my stream right now are just thinking, oh man, I got a headache. Like their brains are too squishy, like too squishy. Like you touch their brain and it's like a sopping wet sponge.
struck the Roman Empire and killed millions. Significantly.
Okay guys, let her cook.
The Roman
Maybe she's on something. Maybe she's on something. Let her cook.
Then the war, at the same time as that was actually going on, Rome was engaged in the Marco-Manic Wars against the Germanic tribes, which stretched the empire's military resources. So, put it this way, the Roman Empire fell to Gothic titties. And then economic impact. The plague and wars together led to labour shortages, decreased agricultural production.
Like, I actually understand what she's saying. But this is how you make a mountain out of a molehill. There would have been a much better way of analogizing this whole thing. You didn't need to start flexing your history major. This person clearly got a major in history back in university, and this is the only chance they get to show it off.
So basically starving people, and a strained economy contributing to the empire's eventual decline.
If you're going to make an analogy, if you're going to make a comparison, a metaphor, it needs to be something somewhat poetically relevant to the subject at hand. If you want to make a metaphor about gaming, it needs to be within the confines of relativity of gaming. With the second you start talking about gaming and then the Roman Empire in some level of pertinence, people are going to instantly tune out. It's still like, if it works, but not as well as the way something else could work. I get it. Like, she's trying to be quite poetic about it, and it still makes sense, but not as much sense. Like, you gotta keep in mind, most people would watch this are terminally online. These kind of people don't have, like, most people are gonna tune out. They would have gone back to TikTok, you know? You haven't made a Skibbity toilet reference or a Trackmania reference or a Train Surfer reference. Like, if we're gonna make this work, we need to have like a side panel on the side of the screen that has like Flappy Birds or Skibbity Toilet or some Minecraft content so kids will actually pay attention.
Decline, if anyone's wondering why the Empire...
Is anyone wondering?
The Empire didn't last long.
I don't think anyone's wondering. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think anybody's wondering.
Here's an old favourite that everybody all knows about, the Black Death. The Black...
Judging by the education system in England, I don't think anybody knows about the Black Death. Why are you related? What the fuck is going on? What is this video? I'm so confused.
Death. Has anyone considered what the Black Death might have to do with a possible video game crash in 2024?
Okay, let her cook. Let her cook.
And here we go. The Black Death and the 100 Years' War. 1347 to 1351, during the ongoing war of 1337 and 1453 between Britain and France. So the pandemic at the time was everyone's old favourite, the bubonic plague, the Black Death, which swept through Europe and ended up killing an estimated 1/3 of the population. The war, this period overlapped with the 100 Years' War between England and France, which strained both countries' resources and economies. and the economic impact of
Guys,
this.
let her
The
cook.
pandemic caused massive... I'm not
Maybe this
laughing
will
at
be
the horrible
something that can
suffering, I'm
be
just laughing that I've
understood by the
mentioned
regular
this
layman
gaming crash.
soon.
The pandemic caused massive labour...
Okay, but why is she using some edgy gothic band's album cover for this? It's good artwork, but it seems... God, this video is all over the place. I love the subject of it. I love the conversation to be had, but like, oh my god. Somebody get this person a script writer. Somebody proofread this person's script. Just get this person somebody on her payroll so they could have read what she was going to say before she started talking about it.
Shortages leading to economic stagnation and severe social upheavals compounded by the ongoing costs and disruptions of war. 100 straight years of war indirectly caused or directly caused by the Black Death. And then there's a third part. The third
That's
one.
a sick cosplay.
My third example for this is, I'm not allowed. Are we allowed to say this anymore? I don't know. The Spanish flu. You're not allowed
One's in the chat if you're cringing.
to say the Chinese virus, are you? The Spanish flu and World War I, 1918 and 1919.
Keep it
The
relevant!
pandemic was the Spanish flu, which...
Like, I would have been fine with this if they would have just made one reference. This is the third metaphor for the same subject. This could have been... Like, you could have moved on from this subject and made this... Oh. You know what it is? It's baiting mid-rolls. Like, somehow they needed to make this last 10 minutes. And I get it. Like, subjectivity-wise, it's still there. But, oh boy.
Emerged on the final year of the First World War and continued into the post-war period.
You spent longer... Legitimately, she spent longer talking about history with a very loose reference to gaming than she's talked about the actual title of the video.
Which is why I said 1919, killing an estimated 50
I didn't know I wanted a history
million
lesson today.
people worldwide. When you put that into perspective with COVID-19, that's outrageous. The war itself was obviously the First World War, which on itself was a massive drain on resources and had already weakened the populations of many, many countries, making them more susceptible to disease. And then the economic impact of that was that the combination of the war and the pandemic led to significant economic downturns across the globe. With
Dude, somebody in my chat just said that this video is more like the plot to Metal Gear than anything else. Like, talk about taking a subject that was really interesting to talk about and completely going off the rails. Like, it's still got relevancy, but it makes no sense unless you're like really gig ahead. Like, you could have made this way more relatable and understandable.
Slowdowns, labour force reductions, and long-term social and economic
Okay, but can we get back to the point?
The long and short of it is that in dark times, opportunists will take advantage of weakness. That's what Putin's done.
That's what she's saying. We're back to the subject. She's talking about the AAA gaming industry. She is saying that the AAA gaming industry is the Black Death. Right? Right? Bruh, I'm so confused.
That's what people are worried the President Xi is going to do with Taiwan. It's just something that happens every single time. That's why I called it a dark triad, because you don't get one without the other without the other. That's literally it. Also, I feel like if I can get all of that information from just doing a quick, simple Google search, then...
Can we please get back to the point of the video? Weren't we supposed to be talking about, like, the crash of gaming?
I'm pretty sure that the board of directors at all of these massive gaming companies can do the exact same thing, but apparently comforting shareholders and reassuring them about their profits and this wonderful gaming utopia that they have constructed because of the pandemic is so much more important. I mean, after all, with all of this inevitable problems that are going to arise from pandemic and war and economic downturn, of course.
So I'm gonna try and like bring this back to some sense of relevancy. Like, I get what she's saying, and like questionable editing and like script writing aside, there is a very poignant relevance of subjectivity here. there is an issue in the gaming industry where the success of gaming is very much tied to the economic and emotional connection of the audience and the financial connection of the AAA industry. And to say that the AAA industry don't drive the gaming industry forwards would be woefully disrespectful of how much influence the AAA industry has. The trouble is, because it's become so reliant on the AAA industry's financial side of things, it's ended up tying to the ethical side of the audience. So when you have a tumultuous and sort of a tumultuous time of life for the audience, what happens to the audience directly impacts the AAA industry. And when the AAA industry feels like they have to try and be more predatory, when they have to release when they're less concerned about ethics and the empathic connection with their audience, they do more to try and make more money, which loses the empathy of the people they're making games for. And when the audience no longer have when the audience no longer has faith for games, they no longer buy games. When there's no longer any money, the people who are driving the gaming industry forwards can no longer make games, which is the cycle that was talked about earlier, where it's circling the drain, where things are getting worse. And because there's so much financial investment, it is that cascading snowball effect where trying to be too predatory pushes things over the line. People don't want to put time and money into those games anymore because people aren't buying AAA games. AAA studios can't push the industry forwards. The industry stagnates, and then you're left with basically the only studios who didn't have as much of a financial investment, and therefore less games. You see how easy that was? I did that all off the top of my head with no issue, without needing to talk about the Black Death or World War II or the Roman Empire. Now, one's in chat if my description was way easier to follow. One's in chat if I was easy to follow or hers was easy to follow.
People are going to prioritise buying a video game over, I don't know, food. To answer my original question, are we in a video game crash?
Yes!
I guess on paper, no. But
You've contradicted yourself! And you've just contradicted the stat. You've literally contradicted the... Okay, best point. If we were not in a gaming crash, GameStop shares would not have been purchased and crashed the market in its entirety. If the gaming industry was safe and secure, some random idiots buying GameStop shares and reselling them would not have crashed the market.
I personally believe that it's certainly imminent. So thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you very much as well if you've stuck around to this point. And...
Okay, I will respect the fact that she made it. So this video brings up a good subject. It brings up a good talking point. It's just it didn't talk about it in as diligent of a way as it could have. However, I do personally believe that a gaming crash is going to happen, and it is actually happening as we speak. And realistically, most of us aren't going to notice, not until it's far too late. So I don't know. I mean, this whole subject's a very broad spectrum thing, and I'm educated enough to have a general understanding, but I'm not educated enough to know entirely about this, about everything to do with it. All I'll say is, do you guys care? You guys honestly care? I think I love subjects like this. I love talking about the state of gaming because, let's face it, we're gamers. This is relevant to us, but most of us don't want to have to care because we play games to get away from politics to begin with. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a comment down below about what you think about this whole thing. And if you had an existential crisis and don't care, well, leave a like and tell me that I'm a fucking idiot anyway. Bye!